We are so privileged to welcome Dr. Smith. He is the former director of pain management at Harbor UCLA and assistant clinical professor at UCLA. He is currently president and CEO of Red Pill Medical Incorporated, a health and wellness company with an emphasis on medical grade. Now, I've been practicing this. Cannabinoid? How's that sound? Oh, cannabinoid. I'm going to name my first child cannabinoid. And cannabinoid anatol, that sounds good. Over-the-counter supplements and development of cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. Ooh. We are very happy this morning to welcome Dr. Gregory Smith.
Thank you. Oh, a little feedback, and thank you for reading that poem about me. That was very good. So we're going to talk about CBD today, and CBD is a big topic. So I'm going to go relatively fast so we can have a lot of time for questions afterwards. But this is me here, and some of you may have heard of the American Addict movie. So I produced and co-wrote 2 films. They're on Netflix, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch them for free. And so the reason why I bring that up is that's sort of how it led me to cannabis in general. I was really working on the opioid crisis before it was known and getting people off all meds, not just street drugs, but prescription medications. Prescription medication is a much bigger problem than street drugs. So, and most people didn't realize that, so we tried to do that. And one of the things when I would get people off painkillers and antidepressants and anxiety drugs is that there was no good step down. So this is how I started using cannabis years ago in patients. So I started Red Pill out of frustration because what I would see is I would send someone to a dispensary, they'd come back and they'd be like, that chocolate bar worked great. I slept all night. And I'm like, good, keep buying the chocolate bar. A couple weeks later, they come in, they go, that chocolate bar was horrible. I was on my couch for a week. I couldn't function because there's no regulation. And these were high THC products. So I started consulting with some cannabis or some CBD companies. And one of the companies I consulted with, the CEO embezzled all the money and bought a big mansion. And another company went out of business. So I decided to start Red Pill myself about 2.5 years ago. That's how I started. And Red Pill Medical, Red Pill comes from The Matrix, the first one, not all the sequels that were horrible, but the very first one. And so the red pills, the truth, the blue pills sort of go back into your sleep mode and just the way things are. So the red pill is the truth, and that's why I named it Red Pill Medical. So let's just get into it. So the objectives here today are going to be explore what CBD is, understand the difference between CBD and medical marijuana, the history of hemp, which is very sinister and interesting, the understanding the legal status of CBD, and basically some ways, and this will get into more of the question and answer, the ways that it can help you in everyday health and medical problems. So I'm going to do something that you're going to love. I'm going to really try and simplify this so it's CBD made ridiculously simple. So if you just memorize this chart, you'll have, so my point here is that CBD is very complicated, but we're going to go and try and make it simple for you guys. So this is what CBD looks like. This is the molecule. And CBD, cannabidiol, is a phytocannabinoid. Phyto is plant, cannabinoid is what it is, and so you're going to say, well, what is a cannabinoid? So if we go to that, cannabinoids are these molecules that are found in our bodies and found in plants. So phytocannabinoids are CBD, THC, those are the 2 most famous ones, but there are a whole bunch of cannabinoids, CBN. So you're going to hear about CBN and CBG soon. So now everything's CBD right now. Another year or 2 will be CBN. It's just another cannabinoid. As the science comes out, you'll see more and more about these cannabinoids, and they do all different types of things. Phytocannabinoids are the plants. Endocannabinoids, this is important. We all have this. All people and all of our pets have endocannabinoids and an endocannabinoid system. So what are endocannabinoids? They are these fatty acid type molecules that anandamide and 2-AG that circulate in our body to regulate all of our body systems. So when you think about the cardiovascular system, the neurologic system, the immune system, every system in your body has receptors. The endocannabinoid system has about 3 times as many receptors as all the other receptors combined. They sit where your receptors are and regulate. And it's a bidirectional thing, which is very interesting. Most things, they have an action like a medication and they wear off. The endocannabinoid system can go bidirectionally. For example, if you have a hormone problem and your hormones are too low, it can help your body make more hormones. If you have too much hormone, it can make it go down. So it can go, it keeps the body in homeostasis or in balance. That's what's important about the endocannabinoids. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but and I don't want to get too scientific, but the other important thing about our endocannabinoids in our bodies is that if they're low, taking CBD can make your body produce more of its own cannabinoid, in addition to the outside cannabinoids working in the body itself. So, I'm going to go a little fast here. So, cannabis-based pharmaceuticals have tried to mimic nature. So, Marinols and other drugs like this have been synthetic, where they try and mimic what THC or CBD is, and they have not worked very well at all. Now, the exception to this is Epidiolex, which was approved in late 2018. This was a full plant CBD drug for Dravet syndrome and seizures in children. Horrible. The kids having hundreds of seizures a day. And so this was looked at as a great step forward. The FDA finally approved a drug that was a CBD molecule. But the problem is what I found is that they sweetened it with sucralose, which is Splenda. And Splenda has a lot of issues in itself. And so it's being investigated now for causing cancer, liver problems, gut problems. The other thing is if you read the insert for the drug, it reads like any other drug. Causes suicide, suicidal ideation, liver problems. And CBD is extremely safe, as we'll see in a few slides. So I don't understand how you could make a drug out of the pure plant and it has all these problems. But it's on the market. The other issue with it's about $27,000 to $30,000 a year for the parents, so it's very expensive. So we've got some problems, even though that was put on the market. I'm not gonna.
That's Marinol.
No, that's that new drug, Epidiolex, which just came out a couple months ago. So FDA, the first, because the other drugs were not really cannabinoids. They were basically go into the laboratory and mimic the same molecule. So it's a synthetic. This is actually the first full flower or the actual CBD. It's void of THC, that drug, but it's all CBD, but they've made it into a drug. So that's what we have right now on the market. I'm going to skip this because it's a little bit complicated. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the entourage effect, you may hear this. This is when people say that when you take CBD or THC or medical marijuana, it works better. All the parts work better than when you single them out. So you'll hear of CBD isolate or full spectrum. Full spectrum simply means that you're getting a product that has CBD and all the other cannabinoids and all the terpenes. Terpenes are what give marijuana its smell and its color. If you're wearing cologne or perfume, you probably have terpenes on right now. They're used to make things smell better, but they also have medicinal properties. So full spectrum has everything in it, including THC, and that gives you the entourage effect where they all work better than singling them out. So when you hear that, that's what the entourage effect is. The advantage of CBD alone is it's not psychoactive, so it doesn't make you high. THC is what makes a person feel that high feeling. Interestingly, when you give someone CBD, it actually causes THC not to bind these receptors in your brain that makes you high. So if you ever have a friend, again, that is stoned out of their mind on their couch, the antidote is to give them CBD. It actually can make the THC effect go away because it blocks the effect in the brain. So endocannabinoid system I touched on. I'm going to move fast through some of the science here. The endocannabinoid system is the CB1 and 2 receptors. That's cannabis 1 and 2 receptors. There are more receptors, but those are the two that everyone recognizes at this point in time. The enzymes that make the endocannabinoids go away, metabolize, and the endocannabinoids themselves, that embodies the endocannabinoid system. And we are all, for the most part, deficient in this system because we've had hemp and marijuana out of our system for many years because of the prohibition on marijuana. So, and it's very interesting when you look at that because, Dr. Rousseau was the first one to really talk about this endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And what this means is that if you don't have this in your, he postulated that because we haven't had it in our system since probably the early 1900s, when it was sort of, and this goes with a little bit of the history of how it was taken out of our system. We used to have it in our clothes and textile products, in our diet. We've noticed that there were different disease processes like fibromyalgia, cancer, other things that rose as the fact that we didn't have cannabinoids in our system. So this is where endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome comes into place. That if you put these things back in your body, that these problems will go away. Because if you look at 100 years ago, right, what did people die of? You know, diarrhea, pneumonia. Everybody now has cancer and heart disease. These things were not even around in big numbers when these things were in our bodies. So that's how the deficiency syndrome came about. I just realized I'm moving away from the podium. He put this nice light here so that you'd be able to see me. Well, this light, he put it so the video would be better, and I'm just like flailing over here, so I'm sorry. I'll stay more in the light. So what we call here is the endocannabinoid tone, meaning how much is your natural endocannabinoid system stimulated in your body. And again, most of it is low. So if you give someone CBD, even bad CBD, it works in a lot of people, and they may think they have a good product, and we'll talk specifically about that in a little bit, but doesn't mean that it's a good product. For example, right? So what if I invited one of you guys, or I got a group of you guys in my car, and I took you out into the desert, right? Dropped you in the desert, and I just left you there, and you'd be pissed, right? When I came back, other than you being pissed, right? You'd be probably thirsty because I left you no water, and I handed you a glass of muddy water. Be the best water you've ever had, right? Because you're thirsty. If I gave you a glass of muddy water right now, you'd probably have me escorted out of the facility, right? So the thing here is, if your endocannabinoid system is deficient, even bad CBD works. So this is how a lot of people are selling a lot of junk on the market, and it's working. Some people take CBD and it does nothing for them because it's low quality or it's the wrong formula for them. So we'll talk specifically about that and when we do questions. So that is the endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. Now, one of the things, I think this is the graph. It's been very well studied. And that's the thing, when I first started learning about this, there's so much research, it's unbelievable, mainly done in Israel, because again, we had it outlawed in this country. But this is not some like new thing where it's just like some supplement that's good for you. This has been researched to the hilt. So when we talk about that it's a home run for migraines, it's a home run for fibromyalgia, this is not just an opinion. This was the most common way to treat migraine headaches from about from the early 1800s to the early 1900s, until again, some of the petrochemical companies got it out of our system so they could put forth plastics and other things, which I'm going to show you here in a second, and that's why we don't have it in our system. But the biggest thing here is I want to show you a graph, and this is going to be the end of the science part for the endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. One of the biggest things to prove it was migraine headaches. So if you look at this big red bar, right, this is the level of anandamide, our natural endocannabinoid in our body, in normal people without migraine. I shouldn't say normal, but people that don't have migraine headaches, right? People that have migraine headaches have very low anandamide levels, very low endocannabinoid tone. So when you give someone CBD in a migraine patient, if you give them the right dose and the right preparation, migraines go away. And this is one of the biggest, this is cerebral spinal fluid taken out of people that had migraine headaches versus don't have migraine headaches. You can see that their endocannabinoid tone is low. So I think that's pretty much, I'm not going to do too much science. So the thing is CBD safe. And this is one of the funniest things to me, right, that we'll hear on TV, the Surgeon General, the government will talk about, we just don't know if marijuana is safe, it's this, it's got so many problems, it's a gateway drug, which is complete nonsense. The studies are overwhelming that it's not a gateway drug. In fact, it's super safe. It is the pharmaceuticals that are actually very, very dangerous. There's not one pharmaceutical ever made that's never had a plethora of side effects. In fact, if you tried to get aspirin put on the market right now, it wouldn't make it because of the side effects. So I said, well, how safe is CBD? So if we look at the safety, let's look at some of the mortality rates from some of the things that we have here. So alcohol, This is how many people die per year. And we look at heroin. Notice that opioid painkillers kill more people than homicides. Anti-inflammatories, going to your CVS and buying the ibuprofen, naproxen, look how many people die per year. And then death by lightning strikes, airplanes, dog attacks. I hate when the cow attacks me. That happens a lot. Apparently, 22 people did not think that was funny, right? Because they died of cow attack. But cannabis is zero. In fact, in the history of our planet, there's not one reported death from marijuana or CBD. Cannabis, I should say cannabis. And now, I'm not talking about someone that got high and, did something stupid, but just from ingesting cannabis. There's something called the LD50, or the lethal dose 50. I don't know if you've heard this before, but the lethal dose 50 is something that pharmaceutical companies were used to have to prove to the FDA at what dose would their new drug kill 50% of the subjects. Now, they were animals, it wasn't people, but they would extrapolate into humans. So someone tried to find the LD50 of cannabis, and they fed the rat and the rat's like, Jesus, how high can I get, right? So they give the rat more cannabis. So finally the rat died because their gut exploded. It really wasn't from the cannabis. But when they extrapolated it out to humans, what maybe the possible lethal dose would be, you'd have to consume pounds and pounds and pounds of, I'm talking about THC cannabis, every hour for several days before a person could possibly die from it. So the bottom line is it's extremely safe. So when people are always scared about it because they've heard so much bad press, stuff is very safe. You can give it to children, you give it to your pets, etc. So let's talk about hemp and marijuana. There's a confusion. Cannabis is hemp and marijuana. It's the same plant, same genus, same species. But the plants look and behave very differently. So in general, hemp plants produce high CBD but low THC oil, and marijuana plants is the complete opposite. And this has been bred over thousands and thousands of years. So if you look at what they actually look like, you can see that hemp is extremely tall, taller than me. Marijuana looks like little shrubs. So they look very different. Hemp tends to be grown outside. A lot of people grow marijuana inside for a controlled environment. Hemp grows like trees. Now, you know this is marijuana because you can see that little guy walking. You see the guy at the corner there walking? That's a DEA agent. This was actually a photograph where they busted illegal marijuana. So that gives you some perspective. Look, the guy's taller, right? But if you look at this guy, look how big this truck is. So hemp is a very different plant, even though it is cannabis. So when people talk about cannabis, they're not just talking about marijuana, they're talking about hemp and marijuana. So that's the difference. So if you look at the hemp plant, I'm going to go through fast. The seeds are great for oil and cooking. The bast is stronger than steel. So, and I'm going to make this relevant for you in a second. And the herd, let's see the inside of it. So this is just what the plant looks like inside out, and you can make hempcrete from it. So let's talk about some of the reasons why this, at the turn of the 20th century, was taken in and made to look bad, because the petrochemical companies knew they could not compete with hemp. So when you use hemp to make hempcrete or concrete, it's stronger than concrete, it's insulated, it's a natural insulator, so you don't have to put insulation in your houses. So people in other countries are building houses out of hemp. It's cheaper, it has less imprint environmentally. When you grow hemp, you don't need to use pesticides, because the terpenes that we talked about earlier are natural pesticides. It actually makes the soil healthier. So all the great medicinal benefits from hemp and CBD may be dwarfed by the industrial benefits, because deforestation would stop. You can make all paper products from hemp right now. The water bottles that we have, right? You drink some water, you drink a water bottle, you get out of the car, you see people throw the bottle on the ground. I put you in a time machine, we come back 200 years later, there's the bottle, right? We throw a hemp bottle down on the ground, it will go back to the ground because it is biodegradable. So this is why it's so important that hemp does great things. So this slide shows all the things that it can do. Handbags, packaging, cardboard, and it was being used for this in the 1800s and 1900s. But again, petrochemical companies were getting their patents on plastics and all these things that we're using now, and so they had to destroy hemp. So how did they do it? And so the question is, when you look at this, you go, if it's so great, right? If it's so great, why was it illegal? Hemp was actually illegal to grow in this country until just a few years ago. You would get arrested for growing it. And even after it was made legal to grow in some states, it wasn't until a few weeks ago when the Farm Bill of 2018 was signed that it actually became really legal. Because up until then, even though you could grow hemp in this country in about 19 states before that, you couldn't get crop insurance. So a lot of farmers wouldn't even grow it because if they couldn't get crop insurance, if the crop was ruined, they would lose money. So it's only in the last matter of a few months that this is really something that we can do now in this country, believe it or not, all the way back to the early 1900s. So if it's so great, you have to ask yourself, why are we not using it? Why are we not using it to its fullest potential? You know, I don't know. Everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know why. So if we look at it, we have to look at what's the demise of hemp. And I could spend hours on this because it's very interesting, but we'll talk about just what happened and why it was taken out of our system. So I'm going to show you some Reefer Madness here in a second. So he said Reefer Madness, that was a film. So the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, there was a buildup to get to that point for Congress to pass this act. Very similar to a lot of things happening in Congress today. It was put in front of them as a huge document. They didn't have time to read it, and they were told what to do, and they just voted it in. And it basically made it not illegal, but the tax was so high that farmers couldn't grow it anymore. And this was all led up to DuPont Industries, Mellon, William Randolph Hearst. Hearst was like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all that put together back then. He owned the majority of newspapers. So what they started to do is doing a smear campaign against hemp. And the reason why they did it against hemp was because of all the reasons it could do in industry. But they merged it with marijuana because that's the way they could scare the general public. So the general public to this day is still confused that marijuana and hemp are two separate things. But they did this on purpose. Started doing propaganda films, Reefer Madness, marijuana, the assassin of youth. And so it led to this, it allowed them to get their patents out in this synthetic boom that we see today with plastics and other things that we use to this, at this time because hemp was taken off the market and made illegal to grow. So let's look at some of this. This was a deception of a trusting public. That's what I call it. And when you start looking at some of the things that they were selling to the public, here's our friendly people at Bayer selling heroin, right? But yet hemp was so bad. And then there, of course, is Mrs. Winslow. And here's Mrs. Winslow, and this lady was giving her baby the soothing syrup for teething. But what she didn't tell you was Mrs. Winslow contained 65 milligrams of morphine per ounce, and she would say it works like magic on her kids. And I'm sure it did because her kids were high as a kite. They weren't having any teething pain because she's giving them morphine. And there were a lot of reported deaths from Mrs. Winslow's syrup. But it was morphine. This was sold all over the place. And then, of course, there was cocaine for your tooth drops. You had to have the cocaine in there. That makes it feel better. And so Sigmund Freud even made the comment that the virtues of cocaine were so good, it helps for depression and impotence. So, you know, if you have these issues, just go get some cocaine tooth drops, you'll be good with that. And then we look at what they did in the movies and films, and they showed movies like Marijuana Girl, Reefer Madness. These were real films shown in churches, in high schools, and people believe this stuff. If you want to laugh, you should go on YouTube. You can see these in full length. And the comments are even funnier. There's people on there going, yeah, I like to watch this movie when I'm high. You know, they're watching the movie high, watching Reefer Madness, but it's insane. And then, of course, Hearst did his part by putting newspaper articles. This man apparently took a few puffs of marijuana and killed his mother, father, sister, and 2 brothers. He did kill them, but they're blaming it on marijuana. Look at this. They talk about how people can come to your neighborhood and beware selling you this evil weed. And then there was a lot of racism in this. They basically vilified Mexican and black people back then about smoking it a little bit and raping and pillaging women. And so this was a big thing, that smoking weed turns Mexicans into wild beasts. And these were real newspaper articles. And there's I think I have one more here. And so evil Mexican plants. So they put this in the psyche of the American public. So they didn't even have to tell people to not buy it. The American people were afraid Because if you think about it, there was no internet. There was no other way to get information. So when people were told this, and our government agencies were behind some of these films and some of these articles, people believed this, and people were terrified that they saw that little cigarette that people were, their kid would smoke it and go on killing rampages, and this is what they were told. So this is how they got hemp from people using it and made it illegal. And this is why it was easily passed on Congress, because people were afraid of it. So that brings us today, and what is the legal status of CBD? This is very confusing, and a lot of it's on purpose. A lot of the federal officials don't know themselves because there's contradiction within the government of the legality of CBD, but here's where we're at this point in time. So right now, CBD from the flower is illegal, CBD from hemp is legal. So same molecule, right? So if I put CBD, if I took a flower and I squeezed some CBD out of it and I took a hemp and squeezed, it's the exact same thing, but it's the source which makes it legal or illegal. Absolutely ridiculous, but that is our policy right now. So it's federally illegal if it comes from the flower. And Schedule 1. Schedule 1 means that it's more dangerous than meth and cocaine. Meth and cocaine are considered safer or than cannabis at this point in time from a federal standpoint. It's ridiculous. Hemp-derived CBD, that's the key. Hemp-derived contains less than 0.3%. That's the arbitrary number. And where that number came from, research it, and just seemed like someone just came up with it and they just rant with it. There's no scientific basis for that number whatsoever, but that's the law that we have. If your CBD contains less than 0.3% THC, then it's illegal. It comes under the Farm Bill. You can send it to different people. You can mail it now legally since the Farm Bill was signed, except for these 3 states are still in the dark ages. If you live in Idaho, Nebraska, or South Dakota, you can be arrested. In fact, there was a lady that was arrested. She had a little shop, and she was selling some CBD oil, and the feds tested it, and it had a little THC in it, and they shut her store down. It was a little mom-and-pop place, and she said she thought it was pure CBD. She didn't know. She thought it was hemp oil. Hemp oil comes from the seeds, which has nothing to do with CBD. That's another confusing. So there's hemp oil, there's CBD oil, and there's marijuana. So when I showed you those seeds earlier, that's actually the seeds from the plant. If you grind them down, you can get oil. Tastes great. You can cook with it. It has health benefits, but it's not CBD. And people confuse the public. Like if you go on Amazon right now and go, hemp oil, people think it's CBD. There's no CBD on Amazon. It's hemp oil. It comes from the hemp plant, but it's not CBD. So people are taking advantage of the confusion in the marketplace and the confusion of people. And I just said at this table a few minutes ago that on all of our products, right, we have to put the FDA disclosure on there. It says it can't make medical claims, and please see your doctor, before you start using this product. And that's like the worst person you could say is a doctor, because most doctors, I'm telling you, the worst is the doctors. They don't know anything about it because they weren't trained. Just like I was classically trained, you have to make an effort to learn this stuff, and most of them are too busy, don't know it, or they've been institutionalized in their thinking that it's evil. And so they're like, oh, no, you can't use it. It's bad for you, because they're not educated on how great this stuff is for people. So California and 9 other states have fully legalized cannabis. So in this state, you can do anything you want. And you don't need a medical marijuana license anymore. You can go buy it. It's fully legal. So after we leave here, let's all go out and get some cannabis, okay? So you can all do it if you want. So CBD versus THC. So again, just real quick, just a little bit of science here. These are the things that CBD and THC does. So one of the things I want to impress upon you is that CBD and THC kills all cancer cells. All cancer cells. Now, does it cure cancer? That's a different question, but it kills all cancer cells by a different mechanism. Doesn't matter if it's prostate, lung, cervical, you name it. And so you would think people would be running and just screaming at the hell that this stuff cures, but they don't, because it's a big money maker. Sick people, remember, sick people is a great business. You could cure the healthcare crisis in a heartbeat if you just kept people healthy, but being sick is profitable. Being sick and not dying, that's the key. Don't die. You stay sick, like you have hypertension, diabetes, you keep every month for like 30, 40, 50 years. So you stay sick, don't die, but stay sick enough that you need the medication, big money. If you cure people, then there's no money. So that's why there's no emphasis on cures. There's only emphasis on new treatments for symptoms. We are a symptom-based healthcare system, and that's why we have so many problems. As an aside, just so you know, we currently spend about 14% of our GDP, or gross domestic product, on healthcare. The next closest country is France at about 7%. So we spend double more than any other country in the world. But we consistently rank either dead last or next to last in every important healthcare indicator from all the industrialized countries in the world. We even do worse than some, we're on par with some third world countries in some healthcare when you look at some of the analytics. So you have to ask yourself why, and it's because we like to treat symptoms because it's profitable. So think about that. You take control of your own healthcare, you will be a lot more healthier than just blindly following the advice of a doctor. And I'm telling you that, and I'm a doctor, but I'm not saying that doctors are bad, but most conventional doctors are going to give you conventional treatment, and we know that that's not the right answer for a lot of people for chronic disease. So we suck at chronic disease. We're good at surgery. You need a heart, lung transplant, this is the place to be. But if you have a chronic medical problem, diabetes, high blood pressure, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, depression, anxiety, bad. Is that my sign? Are you putting up something? It's 30 minutes? Okay. Let me see if I got one more. Yeah, I know. Before that big cane comes out and pulls me out, let's give it. Let's see if it's. So real quick, if you start taking this stuff, take a low dose to start off. The funny thing is CBD is not about body weight. It's about age. So most drugs are like milligram per kilogram. We found that CBD doesn't function like that. It functions by age. So you could have a 30-year-old person that weighs 400 pounds and a 30-year-old person that weighs 95 pounds. And the smaller person may need just the same or a bigger dose. So it's not about milligram per kilogram, it's about age. So once you get over about age 60, 65, that's when you want to really reduce the level. And the same thing at the other extremes of ages when you're talking about children under about the age of 9 or 10 years old. Other than that, you can just play around with the dosing. But even if you give someone too much, most of the time you're talking about side effects like people get a little bit sleepy, tired, not like medications where you could just usually just die. So I think, let me see if I have anything else here because I want to get you some questions. So the bottom line is what we talked about, a lot of confusion. This is just reiterating what we just said. Most of us are deficient in cannabinoid. Endocannabinoid system is deficient, but to varying degrees. And there's been a deliberate agenda to make us fearful of using this. So anyway, that's, I think, let me see if I can get to my last slide here. This is a good choice. I think it's yes. And gosh, grass is here to stay. So this is for questions. And before we take the questions, if you have any questions or if you want to get I'm going to give everybody here free CBD freeze cream. It's a great, if you have any pain, any joint pain, this stuff works like magic. So if you text your contact information to that number or you email me at my email address, I will get it to the company and they will ship it out to you. But that's my gift to you for being here this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. And
Okay,
questions?
Patrick, here's a mic.
A couple slides back, you said when you're starting to take it, you said 5 half-lives. Could you just kind of explain?
Right. So the half-life of CBD is 3 to 5 days, right? So to reach what's called steady state in the blood, when you take it enough, you need to usually get 5 half-lives. So that means you need to take whatever dose you're taking for between 15 to 25 days before you can say it does or does not work. So you have people say, oh, I took CBD, it didn't do anything. Well, that's because it's not a drug like you take it, or it's not THC where you feel high. So if you take it for that amount of time, that's when you can rule in or out if it's working at that dose. Then you can load, right? You can take a big amount at the beginning to sort of get your blood levels high and shorten that time. But that's the bottom line when you're taking it, is you want to have about 5 half-lives in before you can say if it's working or not working.
I've been taking the oil for a couple of months.
Yeah.
I just bought it off the internet, special $5. And
Yeah.
then when that ran out, I go into another one. Tell you what, I quit taking Ambien. My wrist that I broke skiing 20,
Yeah.
30 years ago, neck hurts, still hurts, but not anywhere near as much.
Right.
From a parachute jump in Vietnam in 1967.
Yeah.
And, I'm 77 years old, so I got a few aches and pains, but I've noticed a big difference.
And you're using a tincture, like the drops?
Just, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad you're getting the result, and I can tell you that I think you get even better results by using it some different things. So one of the things about the tinctures that's interesting is it's hard to dose because it's a drops. It works best if you stay under the tongue long as you can. Okay. Most people will swallow it. If you swallow it, it gets completely, not completely, but mainly deactivated. So you want to keep the drops under your tongue for 30 to 60 seconds. So we've resisted, at Red Pill Medical, I've resisted doing a lot of drops. I do mainly topicals and transdermals, and there's dissolvable films and capsules because it's more precise dosing. So the way that I look at this is that if you have run-of-the-mill problems, right, I talk about when, like a typical soccer mom that's got the kids and just rushing around, the stress and can't sleep, that's more of an over-the-counter. So we sell that to anybody, right, from redpillmedical.com, the website, and that's the website, redpillmedical.com. If a person has a medical problem, we treat it like medicine. So we only have our medical grade products, they're not even open to the public. They have to go through a system where they speak to one of the physicians, and then we prescribe it to them, even though it's not prescription. We're taking it that seriously. Because if someone has heart disease, cancer, whatever, I don't think it's fair for them to just bite off the internet with no person that understands cannabinoid medicine. They stop their medications and die because they don't know how to take it. So if you have real medical problems, you need to get real medical attention and use this stuff as medicine. So that's why we have the two separations there.
I just want to mention, both my primary care doctor, who's very well educated, internal medicine, she's from Ireland, and my chiropractor, both said, it looks like it, I asked them both. And they said, be honest with you, we don't know that much about it. I'm just summarizing. There just hasn't been all that much published in the United States about it yet.
Because it was illegal. Right. It's prohibition.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Got another one over here. Maria?
Yeah, I have a question about the pain management side of things.
Yes.
And also if it helps in the body's repair, like homeopathics.
Yeah.
So could you say
So
something
my
about that?
specialty is pain management. I'm double boarded in pain management and anesthesia, so that's my whole wheelhouse. I've been doing pain for many, many years, and that's how I started using this stuff. And pain management, it's a home run for. It's really a dose dependent, and depending on the type of pain. So there's all types of pain. There's neuropathic pain. So when people have strange pain, numbing, tingling, burning, shooting, fire, that's nerve pain. That's different than achy and joint pain. So if you have that neuropathic type jolting, electrical, just like you can't even function pain, that is best treated with a formula that has THC in it. Versus the CBD, THC, or full spectrum product. If it's just run-of-the-mill pain, you can get away with a isolate type product. So that's number one, that you really want to use something that has a full spectrum when you're dealing with neuropathic pain or chronic pain that won't go away. Now,
When you say full spectrum, is that with THC?
So full spectrum is interesting. So full spectrum used to mean full flower. So like the whole flower's in the capsule. So you got the terpenes, the phytochemicals, the CBD, all the other cannabinoids, terpenes, that's what's considered full spectrum. But now we actually have full spectrum that's void of THC, so we throw everything, because some people just don't react well to THC. 1% of the population will have a psychotic reaction to THC, even tiny bits. So one of the things that I recommend is genetic testing too, if you're taking this for real serious problems, because some people, 1% is small, but there's 330 million people in this country, so that's millions of people, don't tolerate THC at all, even in small doses. So the point here is that depending on what you have, this is where the medical knowledge comes in. Depending on what you have, you need to get the right stuff, because you can see that if someone took it for just a regular CBD product for that type of pain and it doesn't work, they would come to the conclusion that CBD doesn't work for them, and that's the wrong conclusion. But the answer about the body, does it help repair? It helps make the body normalize. So it's not like CBD goes in there and builds things like stem cells. I would recommend stem cells to people if they need to actually rebuild tissue. But it makes the body function better. So whatever the body's not doing good well enough, it will balance it out. So that's how it would help with that. But if it was a true tissue situation, like someone needed a knee replacement, I like go for stem cells before you go for a knee replacement, because often stem cells can just grow, for lack of better words, grow you in new parts of the knee. Sometimes it doesn't work. but it's better than surgery if you can avoid surgery.
On the same page that mentioned the zero half-life, you also had on that BID and TID.
Oh, yeah.
That got my attention. And again, you've got a wealth of products, individualized products on your website. Why not take, the full spectrum or insulin and sort of include that as a multivitamin rather than the individualized products?
Well, you bring up a good point. And that's why we have something called Red Pill Balance. Red Pill Balance is like a daily that I believe everyone should take CBD. Unless you're a person, there are some hardcore nutritionists out there that just eat tons of hemp in their diet. They may not need it, but for the other 99.9% of the population, everybody, I believe, should take CBD every day. And unlike a multivitamin, which multivitamins do almost nothing for people because it's a capsule that has a little of a lot of things and not enough of any one thing to really make a difference for most people. But when you take CBD, that's not true. So that we have CBD Balance that someone can take every day, like as a daily thing to increase the endocannabinoid tone. And then the other things are specialty, right? So like if you can't sleep, if you have anxiety or you're uptight, you're stressed, if you have problems focusing or memory. I've reversed a lot of people with Alzheimer's and dementia. I mean, totally reversed it. Where they could think normally everything again with using CBD and some other botanicals in there. Things like autism. I've helped tons of autistic children that were super violent, that couldn't function, calm down, just all kinds of disease processes. BID and TID, BID means twice a day, TID means 3 times a day, Latin, and so QHS or QPM is bedtime or evening. And so I talk about taking it in divided doses or 3 times a day, depending on what the problem is. And again, as you can see, you don't get this kind of information when you Google what is CBD, or if you just get people saying, our CBD is organic, it's great, buy it. So if you have medical issues, you need to talk to a medical professional so you can get the right product.
So it would be using the full spectrum, the balance, and the other one, so that you get more and more, are you doubling up on 3 different doses of THC or of the...
Well, it depends on the situation, right?
Okay.
So if you don't have any particular problem, you're just taking it for wellness and health, you can take a full spectrum CBD product. And when I talk about full spectrum, we usually talk about, to general public, full spectrum without THC. We do offer THC containing ones, but because there's problems from FDA and everything, everyone's afraid of THC, even though it doesn't do anything to you in those tiny doses. Nobody gets high or anything like that. But a CBD full spectrum product with a little THC or no THC is a great thing to take on a daily basis just for general health. And it makes everything balanced. People see they can handle stress more. Remember, CBD is what's called an adaptogen. If you're not familiar with it, adaptogen is any molecule that makes a person more resistant and deal with stress. And there's only a handful on the planet. Like ginseng is an adaptogen, ashwagandha is an adaptogen, CBD is an adaptogen. So those 2 things I just said are great to take too. So we have formulas that have those in them. We have CBD and we combine them with other adaptogens. So it makes people more resistant to stress. So you can do more, you feel better. I had this one patient, I'll be real brief, ex-football player, NFL player, and broken knees, everything, just 5 back surgeries, and he had an anger problem because he was always in pain. And so I put him on the CBD, and he came back in about 3 weeks later, and he goes, what's in that crap you gave me? What's in that stuff? I said, what are you talking about? He says, because anytime something happens in the house, everyone's afraid I'm going to blow. So he said, my teenage son was walking near me, and he knocked over a vase, and it just blew up on the floor. And everyone just was waiting for me to blow. And he said he looked at his son and said, don't worry about it, just sweep it up. And I was like, who is this man? Who is this man? He's not upset. And he said, it made me calm. And then he said, then after another few weeks, it actually started helping my pain. He was on OxyContin, Norco, and various other drugs. I got him off all the drugs. And now he takes a lot of CBD, but he takes a full spectrum CBD for his pain, and he's calm. And his wife thanked me also because he's no longer a mad guy. Yes.
I have a question real quick. I want to know how you address the cause of the problem And do you get to the cause through the CBD? And also, you said you started this program by your interest in getting people off of addictions. Can you
Right.
talk about that a little bit more too?
So you said, what's the cause of the problem?
No, how does this address the cause of the problem?
Well, how does it address the cause problem? Well, there's a couple ways. There's several ways. Well, one of the things is that, again, because of our healthcare system, anytime someone has a problem, they go to the doctor and they get a medication for the problem. Then they have a new problem and they go to another doctor or the same doctor and they give you another medication for that problem. Then you have a side effect from that problem, for that medication. They give you a medication for the side effect. And then all of a sudden, a person's on 5, 10, 15. My record is a lady that had 42 medications she was taking a day, different medications. So what it does is that all these medications are trying to treat in a vacuum the problem. Can't sleep, so here's a pill for that. I'm anxious, so here's a pill for that. I have pain, so here's a pill for that. Instead of making your body work better, those problems go away. So if you make your body back in balance, then all of a sudden you're not as anxious, you're not uptight, you can sleep better. So the CBD can replace multiple medications because it's just making you the way you should be. We were not put on this planet to be full of medication. Our bodies should be able to handle most everything. Medications are great when you have a problem, right? If you go skiing and you go down the hill and your leg is like this, I want the morphine shot because that's a lot of pain, right? But a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, why are you still on morphine? Why are you on Norco? Why are you on Soma? This is the problem. So it helps address people being on chronic medications because that's really the issue. The first American Addict film starts off with this question, that we're about 5% of the world's population, but we consume 80% of the world's hydrocodone, which is Norco, Vicodin, and we consume 50% of all prescriptions in the world. And we're only 5% of the population. And so the question is why? And I've answered that in many ways here, but the biggest reason is money, because it's very profitable. So that's what it does. It gets people off this stuff.
Okay, we got another question here. We
Yeah.
we have a little
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
extra time because we're still kind of waiting on the musician who might have a bump in the road today, so we
So I
can
don't have
take
to
some more
sing.
questions. Okay, Dr. Smith, is that
Yes,
okay?
That's fine. More quiet.
I just wanted to mention it because Medicare is my business, and I have about 2,000 clients, and Medicare recently published, about 6 months ago, 50% of all the money that is spent by Medicare
Yeah,
is prescription drugs. 50%.
yeah. It's big business, and they have to pay with their that Medicare Part D. They can't control the price, right? Is that
Right.
that's one of the biggest problems? Yeah. That's
Guys working on it.
yeah. That was one of the biggest issues with Obamacare that left that provision. Although he called the president prior to that, almost treasonous for leaving it in, but then they left it in. So that Medicare Part D was the problem. Yeah.
Doctor, what about the individual resonance? I have a friend that went in and tried, just to a place around here, but tried about 3 or 4 tinctures or creams, and they didn't do anything, and then boom, the one that worked with her was, and she loves it and she does fine. But so how does one, we're all different.
Right.
It's an energetic thing.
Right. Right.
So how does this overall CBD that you said, or the full spectrum might work for someone and not someone else also? How do we do that?
Well, I think that getting into energy medicine is a big, different subject, and I can appreciate that. I think that the most treatment failures are dose related and product related. Most people will respond. It's just they're either not taking it long enough or enough. So there are people that can take 10 milligrams of CBD and get a great result. There are people that need 200 or 300 milligrams of CBD before they see something. So that, again, is where when you're not getting information from somebody that knows what they're doing, this is the problem that we have. People just bite off the internet. They don't understand it, and they take it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, they just say, well, it didn't work for me. But they don't realize that there are infinite amount of CBD formulations. Because if you put CBD, we do something called third-party testing on our CBD, so it proves what's in it. And there's a chromatography, and it shows the spectrum, right? So when you look at the spectrum, you'll see a blip for CBD, which is the dominant blip, but you'll see CBN and CBG and all the CB whatever, right? And you'll see different terpenes, maybe 10 terpenes, maybe 18 terpenes. There's other phytochemicals that aren't even picked up. These little blips can be in different amounts, so you can make CBD infinite formulas. This is what people don't understand. They hear CBD, they think it's all the same thing. It's not. It's like multiple different recipes. I was saying at the table earlier that there's a terpene called myrcene, and myrcene makes you feel sleepy. So I can give you a CBD formulation that will make you sleep great, and I can give you a CBD formulation that will make you feel like you're taking Ritalin or Adderall, give you lots of energy. And they're both CBD, but you're playing around with the different ratios of terpenes or the different ratios of cannabinoids in that product, but it still says CBD on the label. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of stuff that's just CBD. They've just isolated it, or it's been brought in from China. They got it very cheap, and they just sell it, and people don't know the difference, so they buy the cheaper product because it just says CBD.
You have to get from a typically professional. Yeah.
You would want, if you have medical problems, the answer is yes. And that's hard to find. That's one of the reasons we started this company, was so that you could get medical professionals to answer these type of questions, because there's really not much of that going on at all. Yeah.
So I think my lady friend is the 1%er. So she's got stage 4 cancer. It's metastasized into her. The only pain she has is in her right hand, which is swollen. And I bought her a bottle of CBD at Mother's, and she took 1 dose, and she said she felt like jumping out the window. She felt suicidal.
Yeah.
And her son had to come over and hold on to her because she was literally shaking.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it conflicted with all the other medications she's taking. She's at UCLA for clinical trials.
Yeah.
And but somehow she said, if I ever see that again, I'm going to just throw it right out because
Yeah.
it just.
Well, it was probably had a high THC content, because CBD wouldn't do that to somebody. And she's probably afraid to take it now. But if you can take a full spectrum CBD without THC in it.
Right.
And when someone has cancer and metastatic, there's a lot of things that it would do, depending on the situation. And we have a mutual friend. I would send her to Center for New Medicine with Dr. Keneally over there, who's spoken here before.
Aaron Keneally,
I think what they do is amazing, because they're using a lot of techniques that are only available in mostly out of the United States. But for sure, it was probably the THC that did that.
Yeah, could
Okay, we
be.
got 2 more questions. It's going to be the lady in red and Joanne, and then we're going to wrap it up.
The lady in red.
Really quick, really quick question. What type of blood work testing and stuff can somebody do to ensure that they get the appropriate, type of CBD, THC level for their particular condition? Because like
Right.
Paul said, everybody is very unique, and everybody has different deficiencies, et cetera, and how they're going to respond.
Right. Well, as far as blood work is concerned, I think the blood work would revolve more around what the underlying problem is, and not so much needing it to take CBD. So if a person had a certain type of chronic pain, I usually get different things to check for rheumatoid problems, for sed rate, to see if there are a lot of inflammation in their body. And there's specialty tests you could do, but it's mainly because of their medical issue, not needing a blood test to take CBD. Now, there's more technology going on in terms of genetics, with looking at specific things for CBD and marijuana. But I guess the bottom line is saying you don't need to take a blood test to take CBD.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
The position I'm coming from is that I have a company. It's a holistic health insurance type company, right? And we see everybody that's on our plan comes in with pre-authorizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then these pre-authorizations we review, because we're technically a catastrophic, but we really focus on wellness. And when we're evaluating a lot of these things, we are looking for those chronic issues. And a lot of these practitioners come in and want to treat them, these patients, in a traditional sense. And
Right.
we basically kind of, what do you want to call it? Yeah, well, we do a lot of educating and a lot of guidance with our members to try and give them the alternatives.
Right.
And so we're always looking at, in cases like that, where can we direct them to get the real information in order to best serve them, and make sure that they're going to get the best care that's, that's going to be the most effective. So in that sense, when we've got somebody that's having all of these health issues, that we interpret, this is somebody that's high anxiety, right? And they've got, the world's coming down and it's collapsing on them, and they've got all these health issues. A lot of that is emotional and mental, and they're just going to do exactly what this practitioner is wanting them to do.
Right.
But there's, so many alternatives. We're still looking for answers and ways to diagnose what the best treatment is outside of, traditional.
Well, behavioral health is a huge problem in this country. People can't sleep, they're anxious, they're depressed, suicides are record highs, and so the problem is most of the pharmaceuticals for those problems either temporary or they can make the problems worse. As you see on antidepressants, it says right on the bottle may cause suicide, and you're taking it to prevent suicide. So you don't have that problem with CBD and some of the other preparations, and CBD can be very effective in those things. And again, I can't say that on a website or anything because you say you're making medical claims, but I'm telling you from medical experience. This is on thousands of patients. So that's what we brought to the table here was clinical experience that's missing from the marketplace. Most of it's just anecdotal, but we are studying it. We have survey studies. We're entering into an IRB-approved double-blind study for cancer pain. So we're looking at this in a scientific way, just like a pharmaceutical company does. So when I tell you this information, it's not just a bunch of anecdotal stories. When I talk about cancer and autism and all this, we've seen it over Parkinson's disease, amazing. And if you give people in the right preparation, it can work for them. And in worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, it's not like a lot of the conventional treatments that if it doesn't work, you're left with all kinds of problems. I've seen people devastated from radiation and chemotherapy where the only reason they die is that their immune system is so destroyed at that point that even the other alternatives, there's nothing left to work with. But behavioral health is a huge problem that this fills that void tremendously. So I rarely put anyone on antidepressants. I shouldn't say rarely, I don't ever anymore. I think they're horrible. The whole class of drugs needs to go away. They cause so many problems that you guys just never published. It's just incredibly bad drugs.
So how do we redirect people, though? It's like getting the education and the guidance so that they can make a more informed decision. That's
That is
the
a
challenge we
huge
have.
problem. That's the huge problem because the huge money is behind the marketing and the education is behind the conventional. So what you have to do is send them to places like Red Pill Medical. There's other places they can go. Refer them to integrative physicians and naturopaths. And some people will tell me, well, I live in this little town somewhere, there's no naturopath. So I said that you use 3 or 4 practitioners to get your answer. Go to the conventional doctor, go to the naturopath, go to a chiropractor, acupuncturist, Reiki healer. It doesn't matter. You get multiple opinions and then you make the best decision for your health because you'll know what fits right when you hear it. You don't blindly follow one practitioner, especially conventional medicine's teachings, because all you do is look at the statistics and you know it doesn't work. I mean, people are more depressed and anxious than ever, and these drugs have been on the market for a long, long time.
Joanne?
Just don't show this to the FDA or Big Pharma. I've already said this stuff to Big Pharma.
I'm wondering.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you have any names of people in Orange County that do what you do.
Well, there's places in Orange County that are carrying Red Pill Medical stuff. Center for New Medicine. There's a place called O2 Wellness. There's several places that what we do on the medical side. What we do is we are forming something called the Red Pill Medical Provider Network. Just like an insurance company has an MPN or medical provider network, we do the same thing. So that we have doctors and natural, but our network is inclusive. You don't have to be an MD. You can be a a PhD, you can be anybody anybody that treats patients. So a physical therapist, because it's over the counter, doesn't require a prescription. We can work through those people. So if you have if you want to see someone in person, that's another reason to just email info@redpillmedical.com or go on the website and fill out a little form, and we can put you in place with someone near you. And if there's no one near you, because we have a lot of people from out of state, then the company becomes your doctor for CBD, so to speak.
So we email you. and
You can email me, you can email info@redpillmedical.com, then everyone will get it. But if I get it, I'll just forward it. But again, if people are out of state or out of the area, we don't have a practitioner there, then the company becomes their practitioner, so to speak.
And there's business cards back here for Dr. Smith.
Okay,
So-
let's give Dr. Smith a
Text,
big
email.
round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This was great. I think he could, y'all had so many questions, he could have stayed for another time.